morning, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I think we may have one or two more coming and going as time goes on. I'd like to introduce Shannon Ross. She's here from A Woman's Place in Doylestown. She was actually supposed to be here a couple of weeks ago on February 8th, but that was the day of the annual meeting that got rescheduled from the snowstorm on the 25th, and we actually talked yesterday, we're like, there's another snowstorm, so we're glad that this one we got squeaked in there. I won't talk too much longer, but we'll just go ahead and let Shannon. So thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. It's funny because I also have a cold, and I was like tempted to say maybe I shouldn't come, maybe I should stay home and rest, but I felt like I needed to be here. So and after we canceled last time, I was like, I'm going. So here I am. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for allowing me to speak here today. I am going to be reading from my paperwork just because I don't want to forget. Oh, okay. I don't want to forget to give you any information. I'm going to speak for a while, and then I'm going to give an opportunity for questions. I was saying to Susan that I do this often. What I find is sometimes I speak too long, and then people have a lot of questions, and then we run out of time, so I don't want to do that. So I'll give you some information, and then we can have questions after. My name is Shannon Ross. I'm the Director of Development at A Woman's Place. The Development Department at A Woman's Place, basically we deal with all the fundraising and in-kind donations. So I'm not a direct service employee. I don't work directly with clients, although because we're a small nonprofit, I do sometimes because it's just needed, or we have somebody knock at the door who needs help. But I am in charge of the Development Department. Saying that, of course, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't pitch for donations by the end of this presentation, so I'm warning you now. So that's where I'm coming from. A Woman's Place, as Susan had mentioned, is the only domestic violence organization in Bucks County. There's nobody else who deals solely with domestic violence. We're a member of the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Domestic Violence. They're kind of like the organization that gives us our stamp of approval. They set guidelines for us. They help us connect with other organizations. They're kind of our umbrella. We offer comprehensive program to survivors, families, schools, medical facilities, county businesses, government entities, and community members. So we do prevention, intervention, and restoration. So we do actually do a lot of education along with supporting survivors of domestic violence. It's a lot of our job. We would rather prevent it than treat it. Our vision is a society where all individuals are safe in their relationships and can thrive. And our mission is to end domestic and intimate partner violence by empowering survivors, fostering community awareness, and promoting systemic change. The program, services, and decision-making at all levels of A Woman's Place are rooted and guided by courage, creativity, equality, integrity, respect, and social justice. Before I talk to you about the services that we provide, I want to really explain to you what domestic violence is, which this gentleman up here and I were kind of starting to talk about it a little bit, because people think that domestic violence is only when somebody is being hit. Okay, that is obviously, physical abuse is a no-brainer. It is domestic violence, without question. But I wanted to explain it a little bit further. Domestic violence is a pattern of abusive behaviors used by one person to exert power and control over another within an intimate family or household relationship. Okay? It can take many forms beyond physical harm. And oftentimes, what we see most of, it includes emotional manipulation, psychological intimidation, sexual coercion, financial control, and social isolation. These behaviors are often ongoing rather than isolated incidents and are designed to create fear, dependence, and obedience in the victim. Domestic violence affects people of all genders, ages, and backgrounds, and its impact extends beyond immediate injury to long-term trauma, disrupted families, and lasting emotional harm. It is very complex and often misunderstood, even by the people who are survivors. We have clients in all the time that talk about how they didn't realize they were being abused. It's very, very confusing. It's very, very nuanced, and it's almost like a phenomenon that takes place, and unfortunately, it's much more common than one would think. As I said, it's misunderstood, shaped by a wedge of emotional, psychological, economic, and social forces. Abuse rarely begins with obvious violence, very rarely. When a person is going to be abusive, they don't go out on their first date and punch somebody. Mm-hmm. They are very nice, and they are very loving, and they are very kind, and they are very sometimes, protective, and it looks very different at the beginning. It often escalates gradually, and it's intertwined with love, apologies, and periods of calm that create confusion and hope for change. Many survivors face intense fear of retaliation. They are financially dependent, and they're concerned for their children, social isolation, or cultural and religious pressures. This is important. Cultural and religious pressures that frame endurance as loyalty or strength. I'm going to stick with this because that's what I'm told. I don't want to get a divorce. I don't want that social stigma of a failed marriage, maybe a second marriage that's failing, or relationship that's failing. Abusers frequently erode their partner's self-esteem and sense of reality through manipulation and control, making survivors doubt their own judgment and feel incapable of surviving alone. On top of this, practical barriers such as lack of safe housing, limited access to legal protection, or distrust of institutions can make staying seem safer than leaving. Understanding why people don't leave requires shifting the focus away from blaming survivors and toward recognizing the powerful constraints and risks that they navigate. What we hear is that when abusers come forth and say, I've been abused in my relationship, especially to family members or friends, the first question is, why have you stayed? Why'd you stay so long? That's not what an abused person wants to hear. They stay because of all these things I just talked about. It's just not that easy. So one part of our education is to kind of flip that narrative and have people recognize that it shouldn't be, why did you stay so long? We should be turning to the abuser and saying, why are you abusing this person? And I know this is a little repetitive what I said, but it's so vital and so important. So, since 1976, we have dedicated ourselves to serving survivors and their children with compassion, respect, and integrity. These are the services that we provide. One that's not listed here is education, but I did just mention that we educate a lot of people in the community. So that's one of our services. We have a hotline. It's a 24/7 hotline. Anybody can call it. Even if you think you have a friend who might be being abused, you can call our hotline and say, what do you think I should do? It's just our portal. It's the way you get to the organization. And it also is for people in crisis. By the way, all of our services are free and confidential. Our confidentiality rules are really significant. So it's very, very confidential, and everything's free. We have an emergency shelter for qualified survivors and their children. What a qualified survivor for us, and we'll look at our statistics later, and you'll see we serve a lot of unhoused people as we were talking about in the service. But in order to qualify to be in our shelter, you have to be actively fleeing domestic violence. You are at home, you're in danger, you need somewhere to go now, you have nowhere else to go. And that is what we're funded to provide. We have trauma therapy and EMDR, individual and group counseling. We have civil legal representation. We have a lawyer on staff with a paralegal. Most of her work involves custody, divorce, and some criminal cases. We have criminal justice system advocacy and court accompaniment. This is a big one. We have several staff and several volunteers who sit outside the prothonotary office at Doylestown Courthouse. When somebody comes in to fill out a protection from abuse order, they need help because they're in crisis. You know how when you're filling out, your tax documentation, imagine if you had to do that in crisis, a big form, and this is like, your safety is riding on this form. So we have staff and volunteers who help people. They don't help them, they just sit with them and guide them as to what to put down. Because the point of the PFA is to prove to a judge you're in danger. That's what the PFA is for. A judge will look at it and decide if you actually are truly being threatened and what's going to happen next, if they're going to keep that person away from you. We have a children's advocacy and program, which is really mainly focused on repairing the relationship between the non-abusive parent and the child. Because even though the child may not be being abused at all by either parent, but watching domestic violence has its own set of consequences for a child. So we try to repair the relationship between the non-abusive parent and the child. We have a rapid rehousing program. There's a couple different avenues, and that's for people who need safe and affordable housing, which is really tough to get in Bucks County, by the way. Affordable being the key word. So we have a designated department that tries to help. We don't have houses ourselves. That's a dream of ours to one day have like housing that we can provide for people, but we make the connections. We provide some of the funding for that. And then we have safety planning and case management. So if we do serve people who still live with their abusers. So we actually do safety planning with people who have not taken that step to leave. I also want to mention that when an abused person leaves their abuser, it's the most dangerous point of the relationship. That's when most homicides take place. It is estimated that over 15,000 women are abused each year in Bucks County, and more than 30,000 children are secondary victims of domestic violence. Across Pennsylvania, more than 119 victims lose their lives each year to domestic violence related incidences, and that's what's reported as domestic violence related. It doesn't maybe always get captured. I'm sure you're aware, a few weeks ago there was a domestic violence homicide in Levittown.
Yes.
And it was exactly what I was just talking about. The young woman was trying to leave, and this is when an abuser who's trying to gain that power and control, that power and control is starting to slip away, and therefore a homicide can take place. So in recent years, our county has seen a 95% increase in protection from abuse orders, rising from 575 in 2014 to over 1,100 in 2023. I don't know the reason for that. Maybe people are just starting to understand that they have resources, but they're significantly increasing. And just so in case people don't know what a PFA is, it's also called a restraining order sometimes. It's a legal order issued by a court to protect an individual from domestic violence, stalking, or harassment by restricting the abusive person's behavior. It typically prohibits contact with the victim and may include requirements such as staying away from the victim's home, workplace, or school, surrendering firearms, or providing temporary custody or housing arrangements. And its purpose is to reduce the risk of further harm and provide legal consequences if the order is violated. Interestingly enough, it's not illegal. Domestic violence is not technically illegal, but if you break your PFA order, now it's illegal. So that's when you can go to jail for breaking that. Let's see.
Are they readily granted?
I've heard mixed things. Because I have been to PFA court and I have witnessed it, and I have helped people fill out PFA applications. I've heard it depends on the judge. Like most things, you know, I mean, there are some judges that really, when I was there, I was actually impressed with the judges. I felt like they were really trying to work out what was best. Again, more complicated. Always, you know, things are always more complicated than they seem.
The problem with protection from abuse orders, they don't stop bullets.
They don't.
You can stand there as long as this, bam.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happens.
Yeah.
That's exactly.
It doesn't stop.
Yeah.
The person there, that man in Levittown, he was going to kill her no matter what.
It's not enough.
No, she had one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not foolproof.
No, it's not, unfortunately. So this gives you a bit of an idea of our impact in Bucks County. We support we usually support about 2,200 people a year, and that includes adults and children. Counseling and therapy hours, this is for fiscal year 24-25. We deliver 12,500 counseling and therapy hours. Hours supporting children, 684. We answered 3,300 hotline calls. We provided $225,000 in financial assistance. We provided legal support to 316 survivors. And we went to court with 778 times. In our shelter, we served 51 adults and 65 children. And then in education, we educated over 7,000 people. And just to break down the demographics slightly for you, we served 71 men, 2,126 women, 7 transgender people, 199 seniors, 197 young adults, 115 children, 368 unhoused survivors, 237 survivors with disabilities, and 49 people from the LGBTQ community. So that gives you a bit of a sense. We have a tremendous amount of volunteers, and we are so lucky. I have to say, we do have an incredibly generous community. One of the things I learned starting to work for A Woman's Place, which is about 3 years ago, is that we have a great community. The donations, the volunteer hours, we want to get involved, we want to help. This is a mission that everybody usually gets behind. There's not many people who would fight this mission. It's pretty worthy, but we do have a wonderful community. So volunteer-wise, we work with about 150 volunteers a year that are pretty active. And they do things from helping us sort pantry items that are donated to, this gentleman here was just telling me he served as kind of a counseling role 40 years ago. We actually train volunteers who are very committed. They can work the hotline, they can be on, could do counseling groups, and that court accompanied stuff is big.
The one thing that got me was my daughter was 15 at the time, and we were having a sleepover with a bunch of teenage girls, and about 10 girls, anyhow. And in the middle of the night, my daughter came up and woke us up and said, and one girl, one of her friends said, "Doesn't your daddy sleep with you?" And I said, "We'll talk about it later." I went to the high school to talk to the social worker. He showed me the stack of cases he had. We eventually, through the Women's Place, were able to get the mother and child out of the house. See, if we took the child, we could be charged with kidnapping.
Yeah.
That's what we were told. We could be, even though we were trying to save her life.
Yeah.
And then found out that the mother, well, he's not bothering me. That's what she said. He's not bothering me. My God.
Good for you. Good for you for doing that. You gave that girl a gift, right? So again, we have different levels of volunteerism opportunities. We also have like church groups who just come in and do a day of service, or we have lots of different opportunities and a whole program revolving around volunteerism. As you can see, it's incredibly valuable to us, $256,000 worth of man hours, basically, that were given to us in that year. Over the years, we have witnessed countless stories of courage and transformation. A mother who fled with her children and rebuilt her life one day at a time. A person who came to us in crisis and through counseling regained confidence and set long-term goals. A teenager who recognized the signs of an unhealthy relationship through one of our prevention programs and chose a safer path. I met a mother and daughter recently that lived in the shelter over 20 years ago. Mom had never told anyone about the abuse that was happening. When her husband beat her one day, her daughter, her 6-year-old daughter, turned to her and said, "Mom, he's going to kill you." So they left that day and they came to the shelter. I share this with you because it was a real amazing opportunity to speak to people who have received our services. So she took her 3 children to the shelter that day, and I asked her daughter if she could reflect on her experience of the shelter so that I could share it with people, so people know what our services mean to individuals who are experiencing this. And this is what she said. She said, "I was only 6 years old when we went to the shelter. I was scared and confused. But looking back, I see that being there made my mom stronger and happier. My siblings and I could have fun and just be kids. We were and still my mom's world. We were always close, but I think going there made us even closer since my mom had to leave everything behind that we loved. This was a part of a new life for us. I felt safe because I was still with my mom and siblings. We got to meet kids that were there for the same reason. The best part was that every minute we were together and everyone there cared about us. I can't tell you how many times I go out and do presentations and speak, and somebody comes up to me afterwards and I used your services, it is unbelievable how many people have needed the services and the impact that the services have made. As I mentioned, all those services before, some people use some of them, some people use all of them. We have a lot of people who come back to volunteer for us. We have a lot of staff who have used our services. We have, which is really wonderful because they can kind of input onto the experience, what helped, what didn't help. We have an advisory board, a survivors advisory board, so it's just comprised of people who have used our services before to ensure that we're accessible to people, that we're thorough, that we're doing the right things all along. So it's really important to have that kind of service user feedback. Here's another quote by somebody. I was instructed by the police to call AWP. I called at midnight. Someone actually answered the hotline. And by the next morning, I was receiving assistance with filing a protection from abuse order, a counseling contact, and other things which I cannot remember due to the stress of the situation. But I absolutely do remember feeling heard, protected somewhat, and grateful for a wonderful group that reached out to me and embraced me when I was so broken. I also share a story about, we had the kitchen in our shelter was redone recently. It was amazing. It was all through donations and volunteer experience. It was really run down, and we now have this beautiful, I don't know how beautiful it'll stay because there's lots of kids running around with pens and markers and stuff. Every time I go in there, I'm like, well, I'm afraid to look at the cabinets because I think they're gonna get written on. But I went to the paint store to get some paint to repaint the kitchen shelter, and I was telling the young man behind the counter what we were doing, and he handed me over the bucket of paint, and he said, I used to live there. And it happens all the time. So, you just don't know who's experiencing this, and it needs a lot of care and love, and we are doing our best to provide that. That's a really nice picture of our administrative office, but it's a very old, beaten up building, and I love this picture because it's like the sun is shining on it. So this year we are celebrating our 50th anniversary, which is pretty exciting. The organization started by 4 women in 1976 who were a part of the organization called NOW, and they were noticing that women from Bucks County were coming to them saying, I'm being abused and I have nowhere to go. I don't know what resources, there's nobody to help me. So they are the ones that started a woman's place. It was like a real grassroots, sitting around the table. It started in Sellersville. One of the 4 women, her husband had a storefront, and that's where they started. It was like a drop-in center, stop by. They started to look for resources for people experiencing abuse. And it started to take traction and get noticed. Newspaper did an article about them. On Christmas Eve, 1976, a policeman called them and said, I have a mom and 2 kids. They cannot go home. And of course, at this point, there were no PFAs. There was no options for that. So the storefront had an apartment upstairs. They ran upstairs, cleared out some space, and that was our first shelter. That was 50 years ago. That first year, they housed about 20 families in the department. And that's when we wound up moving to our current shelter space. And I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute because that's about to change too for us, which is great. So that's a half a century of listening, caring, intervening, and advocating, and it is 50 years of building community, creating systemic change, and standing with survivors. When I mentioned to you at the beginning that we were a part of the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Domestic Violence, those 4 founding mothers helped start that organization, that umbrella organization, which has rippled into all the counties in Pennsylvania, which is great. As we look forward, we know our work is far from finished. Domestic violence continues to affect families every day, and the next 50 years must be about expanding our reach, strengthening our resources, and walking alongside every survivor who needs us. Our goals include increasing the number of beds in our shelter, which we will be doing. So these are our current initiatives. Our shelter, the Bucks County received a grant that we co-wrote with them to build us a new shelter. This is not our shelter, but it's an old farmhouse. Our shelter is an old farmhouse, and it's in pretty bad state, disrepair. And so they are going to be building us a new shelter. We'll be expanding the number of bedrooms that we have. Right now we have 7. We will have 10 in our future shelter. It'll be set up a little bit differently. Like, we've learned a lot in 50 years, you know. One of the things we've learned is that men get abused too. You know, before it was just...
Yeah, people don't realize that. There are men.
There are men.
Because there are some very mean ladies out there too.
There are some very mean ladies, that is true.
The men were brought up not to hit women, or they were intimidated.
Yeah, yeah,
But they love the woman,
yeah.
and that's the sad part.
It's tough. Well, usually with domestic violence relationships, like I said before, there is love involved. It might be
Yes.
unhealthy, but it's there. So we're going to set this, right now, where we function, it's like a house. The future shelter will have like pods, so I think it's gonna be like 3 bedrooms, and 4 bedrooms in kind of separate sections, and then there'll be a shared kitchen and a shared family room. You know, that collaboration piece during healing is really important. But it can be done in smaller groups. The other really exciting part is that it will be pet friendly, at least a portion will. One big barrier to people leaving home are they don't want to leave their pets. They don't want to leave their pets because they love their pets, and they certainly don't want to leave their pets with somebody who might hurt their pets. So we will have pet friendly space where people can bring their animals. I have no idea how we're going to manage that, but we'll figure it out. So we have the 50th anniversary, which we're celebrating. The other thing I wanted to share with you, so let me put my development hat on a little bit. All this stuff costs money. I wish I could tell you that domestic violence was a well-funded problem, but it's not. It's very, very skint. I have worked in other areas of human resources. I can't believe how badly funded domestic violence is. You have a question?
How has the funding gone under the present administration?
We have lost a little bit of funding, and that is, you're gonna test me here. There's this funding that comes, I can't remember the name of it, but there's a funding that comes from white collar crime, believe it or not. It's like an act that was enacted to take money that was seized in white collar crime activities, and it's given out to nonprofits. Well, the current administration has pulled a lot of that.
It's because they're keeping it for themselves.
That's the big area that we have felt. We have felt some other things during the current administration. You had a lot of concerns about, and quite frankly, when somebody comes to receive our services, we do not ask for immigration status. We just help them. If they're being abused, we help. So there's been some scary stuff around that. Interestingly enough, just for trivia's sake, our Spanish-speaking population has significantly reduced. They're not coming to us because I think they're afraid.
Yeah, that ICE would be.
Yeah. Our Russian-speaking population is exploding.
Well, even with green card holders, I had a lot of patients whose spouses, that's why they had a green card, and they threatened to pull them if they wanted to.
Exactly. That is something that is used to manipulate. Yes, immigration status is very much used. I have myself, again, I'm not a direct service staff, but I have been sitting with people who tell me, you know, I'm in process of getting my legal status through my husband, and he told me if I come and tell, I'm not getting it. So it's tough.
Yeah, it's probably way worse now.
Yeah, way worse now, exactly. So anyway, the money's not great. The shelter is being paid for by this grant, but what we have to do is, so as an organization, a quarter of our money, we have a budget of a little over $4 million. A quarter of our money comes from private donations. So that's my job, is to bring in private donations through just private donors. I do apply for foundation grants. We have fundraisers, little initiatives that take place on a regular basis, but we're looking for a little over $1 million a year. That's before our shelter gets bigger and our budget is greater, because it will be more expensive. So that's kind of where we are and what we're looking at in the future. A couple of ways that I'm going to say you could help if you were interested is we have our 50th anniversary coming up. We're having an event in May 28th. It's at the Pearl Buck House. I know it's a little bit far from here, but it's worth the trip. It's a really cool
yeah,
space that
it's neat,
nobody's,
but-
it's a beautiful. And we're having a 300-person event on the 28th. I brought some sponsorship forms, which I'll leave here, which if you own a company, or you have a friend who owns a company, or you go to a company, any kind of business for whatever you go to them for, if you think somebody might be interested, we're really looking for sponsorships. That really helps our event and helps our budget increase. The other thing that we're kind of trying to pitch this year is something called recurring donations. Last year, when the Pennsylvania budget impasse was taking place, it was very scary. It was very scary for us, and I'm sure many other nonprofits, just because I know for a fact that we had delivered $380,000 worth of services that we never got paid for during that period. We did eventually, but while it was happening, and then we had another $180,000 from PCADV that were on a payment schedule that didn't come. That's a lot of money for us. And one of the things that made us think is that we need more stable funding. So this year for our 50th, we're looking for 50 new recurring donors, which means you get on our website, you put in your credit card, and every month you give us $20, just like you do other things in your life. But that's solid, steady income. If we could get 50 new people to do that this year, we already have 8 out of the 50. So if you were interested in that, I have another piece of literature that has a QR code. You could just jump in there and make a donation there. In closing, I just want to remind you of this. A house should be a sanctuary, not a place of fear. A relationship should be a partnership, not a battleground. And a community should stand for safety, not silence. And at A Woman's Place, we believe in that vision every single day. Survivors deserve second chances, strong voices, and a future free from violence. As we approach our 50th anniversary, I invite you to walk with us, past, present, and future. Together, let's continue building a Bucks County where domestic violence has no place and where every person can live in safety, freedom, and dignity.